Guitarology. I have been waiting to do this one. I've had so many different ideas for the ways to approach this one, but I like where this ended up. My guest today came up through the local music scenes in North Myrtle Beach and Charleston, South Carolina, in bands like Leslie, and then later gained notoriety in a more national fashion through his work with Kevin Kinney and Drivin N Cryin. To date, he is probably most well known as a member of Jason Isbell's 400 unit, where he more than holds his own, and I like to think that he pushes Mr. Isbell to greater heights as a guitar foil in the band. I met Sadler Vaden when I was out on the road with Josh Ritter. Josh was opening about 5 weeks of shows for Jason, and he and I just hit it off. We showed up in the same set of black Nike sneakers. We were sneaker buddies, and that, I think, was the first conversation I had with him. And we just kept in touch after the tour. And a few years later, I had the great honor of Sadler joining me in the studio to record the guitar for my newest record, Blindsided, which came out earlier this year. Everything he plays, everything, sounds like a classic riff from some forgotten, iconic rock and roll song, but it's all his own. On top of all that, he is just a generous, warm-hearted, hilarious guy, and I just love him. And I'm so glad he could join me today to talk about guitars, all things guitars. So please join me in welcoming today's guest, Mr. Sadler Vaden. And I'm going to my invite to Sadler and see how this works here. Hey, bud.
Hey, man.
Look at you.
That intro. Good Lord. You have to do all that now.
Well, you know, I appreciate it, man. I went fairly. I thought I went fairly light. I could have gone way more in depth.
My head won't fit into the frame here.
It's like, give a shout out to Leslie, even, you know.
I appreciate it, man. It's good to see you.
You too, man. How's things?
Things are really good. My wife and I are getting ready to, as you know, because we trade emails and texts back and forth. We're about to welcome a baby boy into our family, and that's our first one. So we're very excited.
Oh man, I'm so happy for you. So happy for you. That's amazing.
Thanks.
Well,
Thank you.
This may be one of the last times you get to talk about guitars today.
Yeah, that's that's what everybody's telling me. Like, yeah, man, life as you know it, it's pretty much over. It's gonna be. No, I'm just kidding. No, we're super excited, and we just moved, not out of Nashville, but just to a different location. So all that to say, we're trying to get settled in here, and kind of get back to normal quarantine activities. So
now, does part of your normal quarantine activities include like time with the guitar every day?
It does usually. I just went probably the longest stretch I have in a while without playing guitar, and just getting moved and everything. So
yeah.
People who are married or whatever have in a relationship, you kind of have to like put your head down and do what needs to be done. But I felt like it was good. I felt like I've been practicing so much during this time that I think it was actually a good little break for me. So I went about 13 days without picking up a guitar.
Wow. Well, I was going to kind of work up to this, but since we're already here, let's start here, like the guitar in quarantine, because I was going to ask you, how has your relationship to the guitar changed, if at all, during quarantine? Have you kind of gone back to the like teenage years of locking yourself in the bedroom and like shedding on things? Are you exploring new kind of musical idioms? What are you up to?
Yeah, you just nailed it. That's exactly what I've been doing. I actually got a few books, just like some. I got a book on like jazz stuff, and I got just another like tutor book that most of everything in there I already know, but I'm always kind of I'm always wanting to improve. You know, when I get if I get frustrated on the guitar, usually that means I'm in a good place. I'm actually taking steps forward in my musicality and my phrasing and everything. So, but yeah, I've just been trying to maybe learn some stuff that I don't know on the guitar, and I think I've gotten better during this whole thing. The last thing I learned was the solo to Rosanna by Toto, and always wanted to learn it. Always loved that solo, and I think there was some sort of YouTube. Oh, it was Tim Pierce, the great session guitar player from LA, posted a YouTube video about that solo, and it never. Yeah, well, and he was kind of saying it's the best solo in that's taken place in 4 bars, and
Wow.
that never really occurred to me, but I think he's right. I mean, there's a lot said in that 4 bars in a pop song,
Yeah.
as well. So anyway, yeah, just that's been really fun to learn stuff that I never got around to learning or never had the time or inspiration to.
That's interesting. I have found during this time now, my the demands of my time are different. I already have 2 kids, and as everyone just saw when I almost knocked my camera over, we just got a dog. So, and my wife is still working through all this. So there's a lot of non-musical things I have taken up kind of most of my time. But um, I did find early on in this whole thing that when I would pick up my acoustic guitar. I have this amazing acoustic guitar that was made by T.J. Thompson. It's like a one of a kind sort of thing, and it's the only possession I have that I would run back into a burning house to get. That said, the acoustic guitar, I don't know if I was just associating it too much with the work that wasn't happening anymore, um, or what it was, but not. It didn't help me in a way. Like,
Right.
I mean, I'm not talking about like getting better or digging in and shedding or anything like that. I could have benefited from all of that, but just like it didn't soothe me to pick it up. What did
Yeah.
help was picking up an electric guitar and playing just like loud for me, really loud. And it didn't even really matter what I was playing along to. I wasn't. Sometimes I would play along to the Blindsided record. I'd try to play your parts, man. And other times, I'd put on some Tom Petty or whatever, and I would just, as long as it was loud and I didn't have to think, and I could just like, it was almost like retreating back. It was like to an earlier evolutionary stage of as a musician where I was like trying to figure everything out. And I don't know. I think there's something to be said for that in quarantine, kind of returning to those early comforts, those comfort foods, those comfort activities. And man, loud electric guitar has been like the one saving musical grace for me in this whole thing.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And have you heard of those things called rage rooms? Have you heard of these?
I think I get the concept without actually.
Okay, there's one in Nashville actually, and literally you suit up and you go in these rooms and they just have like a TV and couch and shelving and pictures and plates and literally they give you I think they give you a sledgehammer. That's like if you want the sledgehammer package, and you go in there and just go to town. Just break whatever you want in there. Everything is yours to break. But the reason I brought that up is I feel like you could do a version of that where it's like a Les Paul and Marshall stacks, and you have hearing protection and the whole thing, and you can literally just go in a room by yourself and just like crank into a full stack.
Yeah, I mean,
let it out,
I'm kind of dating myself here, but you ever see those old Maxell tape ads where the guy's
Oh,
sitting
yeah.
on the chair? Yeah, that's kind of what I needed. Like I just needed something to. There's so much extra sensory kind of information that I didn't want at the time, and I just needed something that would just like blow me away a little bit, just for a little bit. I'm not sure how the neighbors felt about it or how my family felt about it, but for me it helped. And I did
Well,
actually try and do a little bit of woodshedding and stuff on the electric, but it never takes. I can never sit down and make myself do the scales and all that stuff. So I
yeah,
wish I
you
could.
know, I never learned scales. Like I never, I'm self-taught.
Yeah,
So not to say I don't know some scales, but I never went through that process of taking lessons from a teacher and, you know, sitting there and learning like here's this scale and here's this scale. Like so my I'm kind of glad because my brain doesn't think that way in terms of when I play the guitar.
what are you
I'm
think? What
not
are you thinking? Are you thinking at all?
I mean, to a certain extent, I'm thinking. I mean, it depends. I think there's like a switch that I know I can turn on when it needs to be turned on.
Yeah.
Like you know, there's the thinking switch. Like I'm in the studio with you. Um, you know, I'm probably doing about 50-50 playing off of instinct, and then I'm thinking like a melody or something,
Yeah.
and but I'm rarely thinking about, ooh, I need to play a C sharp. Ooh, I'm about to go to a F sharp here, or whatever. Like that's not what I'm thinking.
Yeah, same here. Same here. Yeah, that, and I do know musicians that are capable of thinking that way and having what they produce sound very musical and very cool. And there's a whole theoretical underpinning there that it makes sense for that. And I don't know any of it, and it sounds amazing.
Well, personally, I don't like to hear the guitar player think. I don't want
Yeah,
to hear the guitar player thinking. You
no, no.
know,
If we wanted to think, we'd get a real job. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, that's.
yeah, and there's some guys I can hear them thinking.
Mhm.
You know, um, and you know, so take somebody like Frank Zappa. He was thinking, but he was playing in a way where you're like, it is so he just such a liberated way of playing. He just was
Yeah,
so free. He knew so much about music theory and the guitar that he could think and also be, you know, sort of unconscious,
yeah,
like
kind of in the
playing.
flow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Now you mentioned something a couple of minutes ago that I want to go back to because I'm fascinated by this. Yeah, I've had conversations about this with a lot of musicians. So you didn't take lessons. I took a couple months of lessons that never took at a local music school and dropped them when it got to be. I wasn't Eddie Van Halen after 2 months, and I was just like, I'm out,
yeah,
but I do think that a lot of guitarists have some sort of unsung hero in their past, and it may be a music teacher at a local music store. It could also be just someone in like the local music scene that was a little bit more established when they were coming up, that maybe gave them certain opportunities or certain access or helped them just fundamentally change their understanding of how they could relate to the instrument. Is there someone like that pops out for you, even though you didn't take any formal lessons?
yeah. There was a guy that was friends with my father. His name was Bobby Donaldson, and he was from Charlotte, North Carolina, and he was part of, you know, there was, believe it or not, there was actually like a psychedelic rock scene in Charlotte, North Carolina in the 60s.
Wow.
You know, and it was obviously it was already happening in California,
Right.
but you know, in Charlotte, North Carolina, they were probably 6 months behind, you know,
Yeah.
being in the South on the coast.
Yeah.
So there was a guy, his name was Bobby Donaldson, and he was a musician out of Charlotte, and he was friends with my father. And as I showed interest in playing the guitar, my dad got in touch with Bobby, and at that point, Bobby was kind of like Strat with a hat guy. He was sort of in that Stevie Ray
Yeah.
world, blues, you know. And we had a really legendary club in Charlotte where I was born called the Double Door. I'm not sure if it's still there, but and Clapton played there. All these cats would come after they played the arena in Charlotte in the 60s and 70s. They would go to the Double Door afterwards and jam, and it was like a blues club. So Bobby Donaldson was kind of part of that scene. And as I showed interest in the guitar, I guess I was probably 12 at this point. I'd been playing for 2 years. My dad had a business trip to Charlotte. He took me along with him, and Bobby was in town. And Bobby met us at a hotel. And him and my dad, they're making drinks, they're catching up and all this stuff. And Bobby picks up the guitar and he shows me Pride and Joy by Stevie Ray Vaughan, and he shows me Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix. Mm. And he sat down and just played those on the acoustic like a damn man, too. I mean, just on the acoustic. And I'd never witnessed someone play like an acoustic guitar with such, confidence and force. And so it really was inspiring to see. And so he kind of showed me the ropes on that. And after that experience, and I think this answers your question, after that experience is when my world sort of opened up on the guitar, and I started looking at the fretboard a little differently instead of everything being down here in first position, cowboy chords, G, C, and D. Yeah. So I would, looking back, I would say that was a really pivotal moment for me, was meeting him, and him taking that time and giving it away for free and showing me how to do something on the guitar.
Yeah, I find there's so many of us have a story like that, and it's frequently a guy, but it's not always a guy. That wasn't like a huge star or anything, but just because of your access to the person and because of the proximity to the guitar, and like you were saying, sitting in that hotel room and seeing someone just like manhandle that guitar the way that he did, it just like opens up your mind to the kind of notion of what is even possible. And
this is the guitar too.
Oh, that's the guitar.
This is the guitar, because this was my dad's guitar, and this is the one we have. This is the one he played. Bobby Donaldson played. It was my dad's, but for those of you who just joined, this is the guitar that the person who really had an effect on me at an early age. This is the guitar he played. So
yeah. So your dad played guitar.
He didn't play per se, but that was his guitar. So the story goes with that is that my parents took me to a concert in Columbia, South Carolina in 1996. It was called Farm Aid. And I know everyone pretty much knows what Farm Aid is at this point. But, they splurged for we were like the last row back on the floor. Hootie and the Blowfish was like the biggest band of the day at that time. But my dad was a really big fan of Neil Young and the Crazy Horse, and that's who we really went to see. So that concert changed my life because there were so many great people. I mean, legends were on there. This was also Sun Volt. Trace had just come out. I saw Sun Volt, probably their peak. I saw John Mellencamp played, of course, Willie Nelson. I saw Steve Earle play solo. So many great acts. But Neil Young and the Crazy Horse came on, and absolutely, back to the Maxell commercial.
Yeah.
Well, the guy said that's what happened when Neil Young and the Crazy Horse came on. So Neil really was the reason I picked up the guitar, because I was so inspired by that. And when we got home, I heard my dad playing the guitar in his room, and I didn't even know he had a guitar.
Wow.
He pulled it out of the closet, like, we have a guitar? Where did that come from? So, and he was all inspired. Like, he knew a little bit, but he wasn't like a guitar player. He was very, very, it was very casual. Like, you go to someone's house, pretty much everyone almost has like an acoustic that's just like in the corner with a frown, like just never gets played. It's just like the token guitar in the house.
Hey guys, I'm here if you need me.
Yeah, yeah. So it was kind of like that, but he was super pumped up and inspired. So he was trying to figure out, hey, my, and all these things, and that's really what kind of kicked me off playing the guitar, though, because I was very curious about it, and he was pretty good at figuring some stuff out by ear, and so he started figuring out Pink Houses, which ended up being the first song I learned how to play, and all that. So that's Yeah,
That's so
pretty
much
much.
better than my first.
But like, let me show you though, kind of. This is how I played it though. Later on, figured out.
Yeah.
You know, because that's how everybody learns. That's how everybody figures out something. It's very, it's so simple.
Oh yeah, I was, that brings me to another thing I wanted to talk about, which are these like early revelations. Like my origin story on the guitar was in high school bands. I could sing, but the guys that I was in bands with didn't want just like a lead singer prancing around out front. So I had to play an instrument. So I played the
Yeah.
drums, and I was like in like these two drummer bands, and it was great. But I longed to play the guitar, and it wasn't until I went on this like tennis. I was a tennis player growing up, and I went on this tennis trip, like training trip to Florida, and my tennis pro, the guy that took us down there, was a young guy. I thought he was old then, but he was certainly like 20 years younger than I am now. That's a different story. But he brought he had an old Martin acoustic that he brought with him, and at nights the other kids would go out and like get into trouble on the beach, and the tennis pro would go out and get into trouble somewhere else, and I was left alone with a guitar, and I was trying to figure this damn thing out. I knew a few chords, and like into the cowboy chords, and I could change between them if you set a stopwatch. I could change between them in a couple minutes, to go from
Yeah.
a G to a C, moving
Yeah.
your fingers, and so I remember listening. We were in Florida. I was listening to Jimmy Buffett, and like early Jimmy Buffett, like the good stuff, and
Right.
white sport coat and the pink crustacean, and I was listening to this song, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but it was Why Don't We Get Drunk and Screw? Uh, neither of which I had done at that point.
Well,
So
that makes it okay. That makes it okay, though.
yeah, I just thought it was like a catchy song. I didn't
Yeah.
really know what he was singing about, but I wanted to play it, and I couldn't figure out what he was doing. And there was this thing in the case, this thing, and I was like, "What is? I think this is called a cape or a capo. Like, what is this?" And I put it on the neck, and I kind of fussed around, and I realized that like he was just playing those same chords, but capoed up the neck a little bit,
Yes.
and like mind blown. And so after that, I started, I kind of came to this as like, from like the kind of folk singer cowboy chord, um, you know, route, and then kind of later in life tried to do the more lead guitar kind of sideman sort of thing. But that was a huge revelation for me, that capo, and that these people were just all basically using the same basic chords, and everything was just kind of variations on that. For you, kind of early on, what was? I know you talked about Bobby Donaldson, kind of like his aggressive guitar playing style was a revelation. What were some other like early revelations that you were like, oh, I can, you can do that? Like, that?
Well, this like probably when I figured out. So there was a kid down the block from me who took guitar lessons, and he didn't live. He would come to his dad's house over the summers. So I got to see him every summer because he lived down the street,
Yeah,
and spend summers with his dad. Um, so he took guitar lessons where I think he lived in North Carolina, and would come to North Myrtle Beach to see his dad for the summer. So he took guitar lessons back home in North Carolina, but he knew how to read tablature out of like guitar magazines and stuff because he took lessons, and I didn't even know what tablature was.
yeah.
I knew that there were guitar magazines, but I would flip through. When I got to the back, it'd be like, okay, I'm gonna put that down. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So he should, like, every time I would go to his house, he's like playing Stairway to Heaven. He's playing all these things. I'm like, man, like you're really good. Like he was improving. you know. And he was like, well, I just read the tabs. Like, he's like, here, I'll show you. So he showed me how to read guitar tabs. And from that moment on, it was like, look out.
Yeah.
Because once I figured out what those numbers and those lines meant, it was on. And so I would just get guitar magazines all the time and guitar tab books. Like there was a record called The Cream of Clapton, which is poorly named. Uh, Unfortunate name for a record, but I get it. We
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
So there was a companion book for that record, and my dad, I had the cassette tape, The Cream of Clapton. I had the companion book, and then it moved into Neil Young's greatest hits chord book, and then it moved into Jimi Hendrix experience tab book, and so that really was the next revelation in my guitar playing. Because once I figured out how to read tab, being self-taught, I was just teaching myself everything in the back of those guitar magazines.
Man, can I make a slightly embarrassing admission here? So we were talking about like trying to learn some new things in quarantine. I just sat down and tried to figure out what the heck was going on in tablature, like in April. like, like I'm talking this April. I've been playing guitar since I started in college in like '92, so I don't even know how many years that is. But
Yeah.
I came in like this a song based kind of thing. I wasn't really trying to play solos early on. I was fascinated by solos, and guys like Duane Allman and David Lindley were just, and Sonny Landreth are still some of my favorite players. But I was more interested in the songs and how you render a song on the guitar rather than I just figured like I'd never be able to play a solo like ever. And then I forget what I was looking at this year, but it was just I think it was just some instructional videos by I think it was this. Do you know Scott Sherrard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
great player.
Yeah, he had some great instructional videos, and I was following along there, and I was like, oh my god, like this tells you where to put your fingers and what to do with them once they're there and where to go next. I was like, this is kind of a roadmap of sorts. I wish I'd found this when I was
and
a
then
teenager.
the curled arrow up, like saying bend it, like bend full step. It all makes so much sense. So
I had no
that's
idea.
Good. Well, that's good. Now you can learn whatever you want to learn. You can learn.
I need the Sadler Vaden, like anybody out there, tablature book, man.
Yeah, I know. Somebody needs to do I'm not doing the tabs for it.
That's a good quarantine project for somebody. Here's an interesting thing. So, my whole thing as like an electric guitar player, I'm like a parts kind of Beatles kind of parts guy. Like I'm not a virtuoso by any stretch, and I wouldn't say I'm fluent on the guitar in that I can hear things in my head and translate it all to the guitar. I can do some of that, but I'm like if the guitar were a foreign country, I could order a beer and ask where the bathroom was, and I could ask for general directions and maybe make a couple corny jokes, but I couldn't discuss like deep philosophical things, maybe, but I love that kind of way of approaching the guitar. It makes it accessible to everyone. Like you don't have to necessarily be a virtuoso. You do have to have a musical ear and be able to find simple, hooky, catchy parts that kind of support the song and kind of are in service of the song. On the other hand, by way of comparison, I mean, I'm blown away by your fluidity and your fluency on the instrument. And every time I see someone that has that kind of ability, I think like, what kept them from going like full Satriani, or like full Vai? Like what, you obviously have an appreciation for kind of holding back and supporting songs and doing things that are in service to the song on the guitar. Like do you remember where that came from? Like do you remember Did you get it all out of your system as a younger player, and now you're kind of just like tasteful, except when they let you off leash? Like, where did it come from?
I never, I just never really liked, I just never really liked that kind of playing. I never was like, as a young player, I think there's probably always a little phase where, especially in the era that I came up in playing the guitar, which is right in that mid '90s, like Satriani, Steve Vai, that was very popular.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's like Guitar Center music, or it's just like music store guy music. No offense, but it is. I mean, that's in terms of the guys that were running the music stores when I grew up.
Yeah.
They always had a ponytail. You know, they, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they were always talking about Ibanez guitars
Yeah.
and like crate amps and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, I was just into like Hendrix
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. And I liked Eric Johnson, but basically I don't know that it never attracted me, that kind of playing. But also the people that I grew up idolizing, my heroes were always the guys that were either the songwriter behind the singer,
Hmm.
or they were the guitarist in the song band. You
Yeah.
know, they were Pete Townsend, they were Jimmy Page, they were Clapton, Hendrix.
Hmm.
All those people are band guitar players.
And they're also blues-based guitar players. I mean, the
Yeah,
blues is a. I mean, you can have really complicated, technically complicated blues, but there is at the core of the blues, there is this kind of soul and simplicity that is a kind of paring away of all that sort of technical bullshit. And a lot of those old blues players did. I'm not sure if they even knew what they were doing. They just kind of had evolved this style, and it was just them, and it was just amazing. And that simplicity, it got amped up a little bit, for lack of a better, way of putting it, for guys like Clapton and Hendrix and stuff, and they did their own thing with it. But that simplicity is kind of baked into their approach to the instrument. So if you were kind of connecting with those guys and those kinds of players, it makes total sense to me that would have been like a natural kind of break on the, like, fingerboard tapping kind of thing.
yeah, and there was also when I was about so that let me back up. That would be one reason why I think I play the way I play, is because I've always just been fans. I've always been a fan of just like bands and like good songs and stuff. Um, and when I was 15, there was a thing in the paper, and it was like, win a chance to meet little Steven Van Zandt from the E Street Band,
Hmm.
and we're picking X amount of kids from your school to travel to Charlotte to meet little Steven, and they called it a symposium,
Hmm.
guitar music symposium.
Sounds official.
And yeah, and I don't even think little Steven knew what he was getting himself into. But here's the gist of it:
Yeah.
the E Street Band was playing Charlotte. Somebody roped little Steven into coming to this thing and meeting kids and sort of just talking to them about dreams and aspirations, I guess, right? So anyway, you had to submit an essay to get chosen for this
Wow.
thing. So I wrote an essay. They wanted you to write an essay about what rock and roll means to you. And so I wrote something, I don't know, it was like 100 words or less, really tiny, not a big essay. They were shooting at they weren't shooting real high. It was just,
Yeah.
so I wrote something like, it's the last four notes of "Won't Get Fooled Again." It's the intro of "Johnny Be Good." I wrote all these things like what rock and roll means to me, and also about like just freedom and freedom of like choice and speech and all that stuff. Anyway, I was one of the kids they picked, and so I went there, and I was one of the older kids that got to go to this thing, but every kid kind of lined up and each got their, you know, it's like when you're at the parade and there's stuff getting thrown. You know, if you want to get some whatever prizes, you got to get to the front of the thing. So
Yeah.
little Steven was kind of unleashed on the kids, and I kind of fought my way up to get a little moment with him. And I said, "Hey, I'm an aspiring guitar player. I'm 15 at this point. I've been playing for 5 years, pretty good, probably the best player at this thing. But you know, I was like, what advice do you have for me? I want to be a professional musician." And he said, he did his thing. He was like,
Yeah.
"Serve the song, serve the song."
Yeah.
That's what he said to me, and then he walked away. And at 15, that just resonated with me from that day on until now. And I
Yeah.
know, and that, you know, nowadays, like later in life, I'm like going, you know, you hear "serve the song" all the time, but at that moment, no one's ever said that to me. I didn't know what that. I knew what it meant, but I'd never heard the phrase before, or no one ever said that to me. So it did a lot.
Man, that's amazing. And now I mean it's really cool to see kind of where you've landed in recent years, because I mean I feel like in Jason's band that's like a perfect mix of that. I mean there's plenty of guitar pyrotechnics. Really, I mean I shouldn't say pyrotechnics is kind of a pejorative term in guitar, but I mean it in the best possible way. It's exciting. It's, you know, it's rock and roll, and it's truly thrilling, and it comes at a time in the song where it should come, and then there's other times, you know, the majority of the times when it's like everyone's kind of cooking along, and as you say, in service to the song. And it's really amazing to hear that story of little Steven, and then to think of like ending up in a band that has plenty of guitar firepower, but it is, you know, by and large dedicated to that, serving those wonderful songs of Jason's. It's amazing to see you kind of put that into practice.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we live in like the Instagram world. There's this whole subculture of Instagram sort of guitar playing where, you know, there are guys that are literally just famous on Instagram for posting them playing, you know, just a bunch of notes,
Yeah.
just soloing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Showing off, you know. Um, and that's that's good to some extent, but if Instagram went away, then you know, what do you have? You know, I mean, I think it's important to play with people. It's important to look at. I mean, if you want to be a Satriani, by all means, like there's always room for that. And some people truly are. You know, Eric Johnson and those guys are truly amazing guitar players. But you know, it's being a good musician doesn't really mean how, you know, many notes you can. It's how you apply those notes, you know, and it's what you're saying
Yeah.
with the notes. And it's about feel too, you know. I see a lot of players out there that they kind of lack feel because maybe they didn't spend enough time playing with people,
Yeah.
or they've grown up in this digital age of just posting to social media of them playing, and it's like, you know, maybe they only play to a click track, you know. So
Yeah.
all those things add up to sort of fitting inside of a band, you
That's a
know.
really good point. You know, like even just in my own practice, if I'm like, you know, working on a new sideband thing or whatever, I'll play along to the record at home, and man, there's stuff that just works perfectly in my office. Tones, approaches, um, you know, things that I'm doing that just are perfect. And then you get out into the real world, and it's humid that day at the festival, or there's a different drummer than there was on the record, you
Yeah,
know, or and it's the whole context is changed, and now your whole thing has to change. And if you get locked into a way of approaching things, um, and for myself, I rehearse a lot on my own, but I have found that there's this point of diminishing returns where like I don't want to rehearse so much that I lock myself into a certain approach and then can't adjust. You know, when you're faced with, you know, living, breathing human beings that are making music with you another situation, as opposed to being on your computer or on your phone. Um, I did
Definitely.
I did want to just go back here really quickly. My friend Terry Woodburn is listening out in Oregon, and say hi to Terry. And he asked if we could discuss the importance of scale knowledge and practice with regard to incorporating it into our playing. I think he might have joined a little bit later, because I feel like we did talk about that early on. The gist of it, Terry, is that neither of us really ever learned a ton of scales. We know a little bit, but it's not really what floats our boat. And practice is a really important part. I was just talking about my routine there, and Sadler earlier had said that he's spending time with a guitar every day and working with books. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't discouraging people from writing in, and I wanted to address some of this stuff, because it's really great.
And I think it's important too. I think it's important to learn scales, and I did learn some scales, but I
Yeah,
didn't sit there and just practice scales.
yeah,
So it's very important that way you can sort of know what certain scales and the notes are and how they sound, and you can start hearing notes in your head and knowing how to get to those notes.
yeah, absolutely. I want to pivot a little bit as we come down the home stretch here. Um, Kind of the more, I guess, a more emotional. We'll end up at an emotional connection to the guitar, but I want to start by asking, like, let's get to the nitty gritty. Like, how many guitars do you have? Do you know?
I just got another one that I don't know if I should have gotten it or not, but it was a super expensive guitar. I think it gets here tomorrow. Let's see, probably
Just a rough estimate is fine.
maybe 18.
Yeah. All right. Now, are you one of those guitar players that are you one of the guitar players that is kind of like restless, freewheeling, trading stuff in? Like, you play something for a while and it may not be what you may love it for a while, but you want to get rid of it to get something else, or do you kind of hold on to stuff?
I don't man, I rarely get rid of. Yeah, I'm not a constantly selling, buying. Like,
Yeah.
no, I kind of hang on to all my gear.
Yeah, and so I'm the same way. And I was kind of wondering why this was, because there are things that I just don't play very much at all. And I wonder, like, why am I holding on to this? And for me, there's like an emotional connection with some of this stuff. Like, I have this 95 HD Martin HD 28. It's not a golden era HD by any
Yeah,
stretch, but it was my first serious guitar, and I wrote a lot of my early songs and my early records on that guitar. And do I use it a lot? No. Can I get rid of it? I can't. And I think and I don't know why that is. Like, I don't play a lot of those early songs even, but I don't know. Now that I have kids, I think, like, well, maybe one day some of them will be interested in the guitar. I can just, for me, it was such a hurdle to just be like, where do you get a guitar? How do you get into this? And now if my kids ever wanted to do it, I could just be like, here you go. Take this perfectly fine acoustic guitar that is invested with a lot of meaning for me. And I can't get rid of stuff either. And it sounds like you have a similar kind of emotional connection to a lot of your instruments.
I do. And then there's also just the way that with Jason and the 400 unit, the way we've been traveling and things like that. Like, all that stuff comes off of a truck and goes into storage, or
Right.
goes into a locker. And usually I probably have about 7 guitars out there on the road for a show. I play every single one of them. And so I can't load and unload 7 guitars every single time. There's 2 shows we got to go and play or whatever. So at this point, it's kind of like, I have a 12 string that lives at home. I have a Strat that lives at home. I've got,
Yeah.
an SG that lives at home. I've got my tools, so when I come back home and I have someone wants me to play on their record, or if I'm doing my own thing or have a gig that I don't have to, basically saying trying to have double of most things. That
Yeah.
way I can have my home rig and then kind of have my touring rig too. And it's fortunate. I realize
Yeah.
I'm fortunate to be able to do that a little bit, but
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there that are like, it must be nice, but as someone who's had like a little experience in that world, like there's definitely times where like my guitars are on a truck coming back across the country, coming back home, I've gone home ahead of them, and I've got a gig, and it's like, oh my god, I need another one of those guitars. It's not like
yeah,
you don't even have to be famous to be in that position. You just have to be working at a certain frequency, to find yourself in that. So I can see that the doubling of gear to be a big thing. I guess too, what I'm wondering, uh, as we finish up here, I don't want to take up too much of your time. You've been very generous, but um, the guitar. I mean, I will frequently have these experiences holding a guitar on stage somewhere, at the Ryman, which is kind of like a second home for you guys. I realize now, you know, I had it on stage at like the Royal Albert Hall, just kind of looking around and being like, the guitar like got me here.
I
Like
know.
I'm just so grateful to almost to the guitars. I like they inspire the sense of humility in me, not just because I can't do all the things I want to do on them, but just because of like what they have shown me in my life. And I wonder if there's anything you've kind of felt in that similar vein.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've felt that way. I probably don't look at it as much about like the guitar itself that's gotten me here, but just music as a whole.
Sure.
The fact that music is that thing that is kind of magic, and we can't touch music. You know what I mean? Like it gets made. In a live setting, it's made by instruments. You can touch the instrument and everything, but the actual like sound waves that are coming out, like we can't physically touch it.
Right.
And it's kind of an amazing thing to me, and I think it makes it all magical. And so I do. I mean, I've had moments where I've looked at the guitar and I'm just like, I've held this thing for like so long now, like for 24 years now. Like, I think it's important to not be defined by it, though,
Sure.
and to be, especially I think a lot of us have learned in this moment that we're in now is like, I had a friend that posted a thing on Instagram the other day. He's like, first and foremost, I'm a person, you know, and I'm not just a guitar player. You know what I mean? And so
Hmm.
but it's special that you picked up something at first that you could barely like get your fingers to work,
Yeah, with the
to
lines on your.
now you don't you don't even you don't even think about it now, and you pick it up, and next thing you know you're on stage at Royal Albert Hall or whatever. And
Yeah.
um yeah, sound, to Steph, yeah, sound, it touches you, what, metaphysically or something, but you can't actually like you can't like hold the music like in your hand.
Yeah, you
You
can.
can
It's
hold.
like the air pressure, differences. Yeah, you can feel
Yeah,
that. But yeah,
yeah.
I kind of got what you were saying there, and I agree. Like it's not like the guitar is this like totemic kind of like talisman. Like this has gotten me to the place. It's this guitar. It's more
Yeah,
just like it's more like this spiritual kind of practice of like finding music through with that tool through the guitar, and I think like you've probably felt the same to a degree that when we can't do it in quite the same way, it kind of makes you kind of realize just what you are missing and what you had, and I don't think we'll ever go back to it and kind of think of it the same way ever again. And of course, to bring this full circle, you were talking about like welcoming a child into your life like that adds a whole new dimension to making art, and it raises the stakes, and it's in just the most amazing ways. And I'll leave here with the advice that my friend Lori McKenna, who knows a thing or two about kids because she has 5 of them, said to me when I was wondering, like, am I going to have time to play guitar once I have kids? And she goes, you'll figure all that stuff out. You can't figure it out in advance. She said, the thing you have to be prepared for is your heart is going to be so much bigger when these kids come along. You're not even going to be able to conceive of it until after it happens. You don't possibly think you have more love to give until they come along and you have this opportunity to give it. So I'm so excited for you, and I'm just so grateful we got a chance to get this in, and that you were able to talk with us today. And just wanted to say thanks, man.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Mark. I love what you do, man. It's always good to talk with you. And yeah, we're excited. You know, we're kind of hunkered down, getting ready for this whole life change, and it's gonna be cool. So
Awesome,
I'm gonna
man.
play guitar all around him all the time. I hope he's ready for it. He doesn't know what
Yeah,
he's getting into.
yeah. Start them young. All right, man. Best wishes, and we'll talk to you real soon.
All right, thanks, Mark.
Peace, Sadler.
See you, man.